Well, hello there, ladies and gents. Great to see you again, and welcome back to Modern Wealth Management. Ryan Ruff here, your moderator, and as always, I'll be joined by Darrick Hutchins, co-founder of Monon Wealth Management. We're going to be jumping into another really great conversation here today, and as we do a lot of these episodes, there's a common theme. Darrick and I really talk a lot about business owners and the challenges and circumstances facing those folks, and today we thought we'd bring one of them right to you here on the show today. We got a great guest joining us, in Mr. Joe Pohrer. Joe being the president of Pauly Jail Building Company, a local organization to the greater Indiana area. Really excited to be welcoming Joe aboard. But before we say hi to Joe and get into the nitty gritty, let's say hey to Darrick. Darrick, good to see you this morning. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, Ryan, and I'm super excited about today's guest. Joe has been a fixture in the community for the last 20 or 30 years. And, a lot of people may know about Joe and about his company, but I don't think that they know the passion that he has, the story that he has to tell, and the success that he's built here with Pauly Jail in Central Indiana.
That's great to hear. Well, hey, with that, let's go ahead and bring him on. Joe, great to see you. Welcome to Modern Wealth Management. We appreciate you and your time today.
Good morning, you guys. And thank you very much, Darrick, for the wonderful introduction. I don't think I've heard it said any better than that before. So I guess let's just go from there, right?
We will.
Well, let me just tell you a little bit about myself and my company. Pauly Jail Building Company is the family business. It was started in 1856 in St. Louis, Missouri, right on the Mississippi River. We were the first jail building company in the country. I am the fifth generation owner of the family business. My brother and I were best friends and partners. Unfortunately, he passed away just about 2 summers ago. So I was then the sole owner. And then since then, I've turned over half of the company's owner voting share stock to Jared Bailey and Regina Maltese, who are my CFO and my vice president of operations. So now there are 3 owners of Pauly Jail Building Company in today's market.
That's there's so much. There was so much packed into there, Joe. With the history. You have a long history of your company, and you've already focused in on taking it now to the next generation and making sure the longevity. I'd like to back it up a little bit, because if you tell the story the way you just did, man, sure does seem easy. You were just, it sounds like to me that you were basically given the business and all you had to do was keep the ship ashore. But I've known you long enough to know that that's not really the case. I want you to back us up a little bit further, and you don't have to go all the way back to, to previous generations. But when you got out of University of Kentucky, Pauly Jail wasn't quite the empire that it is today. Why don't you tell us where we were at that point and the story about getting it just maybe to current existence?
All right. Well, that was actually 1980. And in 1980, my mother and father were still alive. And my father, but it wasn't Pauly Jail Building Company, because you have to actually go back to the mid-1960s to find out. So in the mid-1960s, Pauly Jail, they never went bankrupt, but they did sell off their assets and close their doors. All right. And what happened is one of our competitors, still around, Southern Steel Company from San Antonio, because the name was so powerful, they bought the copyrighted name Pauly Jail Building Company, because they never wanted Pauly Jail to ever come back into business. And they knew my father had 3 boys, so it was always a possibility. All right. So they bought the copyrighted name. They held on to it all the way up until 2001. And when their company got sold to another company, they forgot to run the job through Pauly Jail. We had a copyright search on the name, and we got the name back. So in 2002, we actually became Pauly Jail Building Company again. In 1980, that you're talking, we were just known as the Pauly Pohrer Group, because that's as close as we could get. And back then, it was just a shell company. It was my father and I basically working out of a 2-man office. And then eventually my brother came back from college, and there was the 3 of us, and then grew. But it never really, it never really got to where we are today because we never really had enough capital to make the company run. And then, unfortunately, just about the time it was starting to come back, my mother and father both passed away. I was 87 and 88. So that set us back again. And then it finally got going probably up once we got Pauly Jail back in the early 2000s. I'd say it got back up and running about 2010 or 11, 12. Then we hit another bump in the road. That set us back again. And that happens in construction. And then about 7, 8 years ago, Jared got a lot more involved. Regina got more involved. And we just took off. We took off on a marketing program of our team. We put together a team concept of manufacturers. No one else has ever really done that. Then we went out on the road and we promoted it in our training seminars. If you ever want to see what I'm talking about, you can go to our website and pull up numerous training seminars we've done across the country. And then exponentially, starting in 2016, we pretty much have doubled sales in size almost every year. I think right now we're up to 23 or 24 employees. Just added on a brand new 10,000 square foot warehouse. So we're getting ready to probably make the next jump. The only thing I would say is I think we've been pretty cautious on not trying to outkick the coverage because you can certainly have too much work and go out of business. But I think we're in a pretty good position. I'd probably say right now in sales and revenue, we're probably the number one detention contractor in the country.
Wow. And when you talk about detention contracting for the general audience, specifically, what is it that you guys do?
Okay, so if you were a layman and I was trying to explain to you, and I let's just say I showed you your house as an example, and I said, look, let's just consider your house to be a county jail. So at this county jail house, we would buy from our manufacturers the security doors, the security locks, the security glass, the steel furniture, the security door controls, and the steel cells. Now, those are all made by our manufacturers. Then we would put it together in a package, coordinate it, and install it. And that's pretty much what a detention equipment contractor does.
And you're able to do all of that with just the 24 employees?
And that's 24 in the office. Then we have probably 15 of our own field union ironworker foremen. So that's one thing I think that separates us from our competition. We never gave up the control of being able to install the products, right? And we still have that today. In fact, we've just added a couple of new foremen to that mix too.
Awesome. Awesome. Joe, as you've scaled your business, I mean, I'm glad you told that story. I kind of encouraged it because I knew you've shared that story with me in the past. That the empire, this empire that you've built at this point, it's really been kind of a calculated growth strategy. Take me back to when you said like 2016, you started bringing in some of you call them teammates. Tell me the thought process around that, around gathering up other leaders within your industry and progressing the entire industry forward as a group. Talk to me about that.
Well, that's a great thing. And you can also, what I said earlier, and I think people who've been in construction would know this. Starting in 2008, 2009, there was definitely a big downturn in construction in general in this country. Now, that didn't catch up to the correctional market until about 12 or 13 because most of that work was in the pipeline. But if you go back to 2013 and 2014 and 2015 and look at all the manufacturing companies that used to be in business for over 100 years, all of a sudden they were wiped out in about a 3-year stretch. So probably 75% of the companies that made doors and frames who had been around were gone. So that pretty much gave me the idea that, okay, only certain guys are left. One of them in every product line has to be the leader. There has to be one company that's better than all the other companies, all right? And what do those companies all have in common? Well, it turns out that, first of all, they were owned by guys that we were friends with. So we have one thing in common. We all own or at least manage our own companies, which I think puts a difference into how do you approach the product that you're making. Well, if it has your name on the door when it goes out the door, it's certainly going to have a different feel than if you just work for a company that's just making a widget. All right. And so all the manufacturers on our team were all friends who own companies who do business. I call it the three boxes. You can call it whatever you want. I think it's a pretty simple way to do business. I'm not really sure why people do business with people they don't like and people they don't trust, but so that's the philosophy and the way we do it. I don't think anybody else does it in our industry that way, but that's the way we do it.
I'm always so impressed when I hear about that, and obviously I've gotten a chance to know you, Joe, and some of the other business leaders that you call friends, and the passion that you guys have for, again, progressing the business forward is something that I'm envious of. And I think that for those business owners that, not everybody listening here today is in the detention contracting space. Some are, but not everybody is.
Thank goodness for that. There'd be way too many competitors.
Exactly. But I think that everybody out there, in their own industry can, everybody's been through their own tough challenges, where they've seen their industry consolidate in one way or another. And I appreciate you sharing that story. The other thing that I know about you, Joe, is that you and this team that you've built are on the forefront of innovation. You guys are not just looking to replace the blocks of jails in the past. Within your seminars and so forth, you're constantly talking about what's next. Tell me, what is it about you that seeks that innovation and pushes the industry forward, and where are you going next?
Well, one of the things I've always thought is, if you are a manufacturer and you have a good product and you're making profits, okay, there hasn't been a manufacturing firm that ever got. I like to use Microsoft as a prime example. Bill Gates came out with Microsoft 1. Well, by the time you caught up to Microsoft 1, he was on Microsoft 4 because he kept taking profits, putting it back into research and development, which is what Pauly Jail used to do when we were a manufacturer. So all the manufacturers on this team, they're all making money. And instead of just taking their money and going and buying boats and airplanes, they're putting it back into research and development. And they're coming up with, as an example, the door controls, security electronics, your cell phones. You know how fast that's all changing today. Well, a lot of the electronics companies aren't putting any money into research and development, but Accurate Door Controls on our team plows back in millions of dollars and comes up with new products and technologies to make it. First of all, they're making a better product. Second of all, they're making it a better product for the end user, the sheriff, or the jail. And then it's better for the entire industry, right? Now, the other thing, the one part of the last part that you asked me is, what do I think is coming next? Well, I know what's coming next. It's mental health. And mental health in correctional facilities has been an issue for, ever since we closed down the mental health institutions. And if you saw our seminars from 2 years ago when we first started attacking this issue, I went back and did the research and found out that in the 1950s, when we had 160 million people in this country, we had 575,000 mental health secure beds. Now, they used to call them the nut houses, for lack of a better term. We had one right here in town, Central States, right? And then, of course, Congress got involved, and they decided we're going to close them all down, and they did by 1983. And so in 2020, now we have 360 million people. We only had 40,000 secure beds for mental health. And you wonder where all the homeless people and all the people, that's where they came from, all right? And so on any given day, you can ask any sheriff in any county or any warden in any state prison, and they're going to tell you 60 to 70% of their inmates on that day have at least one, if not multiple, mental health orders. And so Question is, what are we going to do about it? Well, the people that think they're really smart have sat around now for 30 years. They go to these conferences and they drink champagne and they eat caviar and they think deep thoughts, but they don't do anything. They don't make anything. They don't build anything. They just think about it and they feel good because they thought about it. And I'm like, my great great grandfather invented all the products and patented them in this industry. I think we can do something different. So we came up as an example, Steel Cell North America, one of our companies. They have now made a mental health cell, which looks like probably nicer than the dorm room you stayed in when you were in college, but it is actually a steel cell. It's just dressed up differently. And accurate door controls. What are the three things that affect an inmate who has mental health? Well, it's the sound in those day rooms in the cells. So we now can control the sound. We can make it sound in that person's cell like the Pacific Ocean. The other thing is the lighting, because it's just now we can control the lighting. So if you have an issue that your lighting sets you off, we can tone it down. And then the last thing is, if you've ever been inside of a cell block or in a cell, is the smell. Okay, that's a huge thing, and we can control that as well. So those are products and technologies that we've been working on now for 4 or 5 years, and we are now selling those. I bet we're up to about 30 or 40 projects, and every time we add a new one, we come up with new products and technologies. So, but that's the thing coming down the track for sure. Every county now is talking about, even if they're going to build a small new jail, we've got to have a wing for mental health.
Love it. Love it. And I've actually been to one of those seminars. I've heard how passionate you are about this. But as the point of this conversation, it's just, I want to emphasize, you wouldn't think of a jail builder as super innovative. That's exactly what you and your team are, thinking about what's next. Let's get into some of the financial aspects here. As you think back upon the history of the company as you've run it, what's been some of the most important financial decisions that you've made? And here I'm not talking about your own personal wealth. I'm talking about the financial decisions you've made in running Pauly Jail.
Well, I think the biggest thing when I decided I was going to run it the way I wanted to run it, I determined that there are areas of the country that are very difficult to work in if you're not from there. Chicago's a prime example. New York City and other areas. So I determined that those are areas we were not going to go work in, because it's hard to call a job unprofitable unless you don't get paid, right? Then we decided that there were contracting companies that ran their jobs a certain way. They never paid their bills. So those jobs never made any profit. So at the end of the day, in a nutshell, I was like, look, if we're not going to make profit on the job, then it's not a sale. So I'm going to sell it the way I want to sell it. And my answer is, if you don't like the way we run and do the job, then you should hire the second place team. And then when it goes south, and it will, you'll come back to us. And then what we've decided to do from there was find the good contractors in an area and the good architects, get with them and make a team, and then make those jobs go well so that they then sell themselves. And that probably is the number one thing that's changed everything in the last 7 or 8 years. That issue right there.
I love that. Sounds like to me you really focused in on, let's be really good at the jobs that we want to take, the jobs that we know we can produce better than anybody else, and let the other jobs go to whoever else wants them, because those aren't for us. That's really defining and focusing on your niche, isn't it? As your business grew, Joe, so did your net worth. And, and as the business and your personal net worth grew, how did the approach that you took to your wealth management change over time?
Well, I think the first thing was I had money. It's hard to get wealth management when you don't have any money, right? So I think I kind of follow the same formula. All right, as an example, I work with you. I entrusted my company's 401k to you. A lot of my friends that I work with are working with you, and once again, I think it goes right back to what I just said. We work with the construction management firms and the architects who do good work, who own their own companies, and that we can excel with. And I think that's the same. That's the reason that when people ask me all the time, hey, why don't you invest with me? I'm like, well, first of all, I don't really know you. All right. And just because you're an investor doesn't mean I'm going to invest with you. All right. And I think that's one of the reasons. I remember the first time we sat down and talked about, when I really didn't have much money, and we talked about, well, where do you want to be? And I said, well, we need to get to a point. So let's set a goal and then let's get after it. And that's kind of what we did, right? And we've obviously accomplished that and more, but that's pretty much where we started. I mean, I think I started with $25,000, something like that.
Yeah, but I think that the primary focus of that is that we sat down first and foremost and talked about what were the goals, what were some of the things that you wanted to achieve. One of the things that we talked about is, hey, things are good again now in your industry and at Pauly Jail, but they always haven't been. So we've talked about in the past, we've talked about making sure that you don't ever have to revisit what you and I refer to as the dark times, don't we?
The dark days. I mean, I think I recall those. All right. Well, and I think once again, it's, but it gets back to, you know me well enough to know that I'm not a gambler, right? Not a huge risk taker, and I've already been there and, got the fancy boats and the car and all that nonsense. And now, I'm like, I want to be able to go through until the day I'm out of here and not have to worry about, hey, did I invest it? Did we invest enough money? Did we do it the right way? Am I going to ever run out of money? I think it's what a lot of people lose sight of. They think they can just retire and go, man, I've got $1 million. Well, do you know how fast that goes when you don't have any money coming in? I mean, it just goes. And I've had friends of mine who took early retirements and now had to go back to work because they ran out of money.
To further the conversation around wealth management, wealth management isn't just investing money. There's other aspects to it as well. And one of the aspects that you and I've spent some time on is your estate planning and focusing in on the succession planning of Pauly Jail. And I don't know of very many entrepreneurs, business owners that have put as much thought into the succession of their business as you have. But it is different than a lot of other people have done. First of all, can you tell me what was the primary driver for the succession planning decisions that you made?
Well, I can tell you what happened. When my brother and I were 50-50 partners, he thought certain things. I didn't agree. He thought we should take more money from the company. I said we should keep money in the company because there will be a rainy day. You just don't know when it's coming. But anyway, when he did pass away and I became sole owner, I'll never forget, we sat down in our conference room and we had our insurance company and our attorneys and the bank and the bonding people. And they're like, well, you now own all the company. So you could take all the money. And one or two of them even had the crazy idea that, well, I could sell it and I could make 6 or 7, 8 times EBITDA, walk out of here a multi-gazillionaire. And of course, I then said, well, okay, now I've seen that happen a million times. Guys sell out, take all the money, and then next thing you know, new owners come in, they fire all the employees because they think they're making, and everyone loses their job, and the company's reputation goes to hell in a handbasket in about 2 years, right? I determined that I didn't want to do that. I wanted Pauly Jail Building Company to get to 200 years because at 200 years, we will be the oldest contracting company ever in this country, right? And I know I'm not going to live that much. I'm not going to live another 32 years, but Jared and Regina are in their early 40s. Okay. They can then become, they don't have to have the last name Poor to be an owner and carry on the tradition. So that was one of the reasons I sold them 25% ownership with voting share. So now they're owners. And by the time they get to be up where my age is, we're going to have another group of people coming behind them. They'll probably will be two more key employees. And we will get to the seventh or sixth or seventh or eighth.
You know what I love about that so
that's the way I
much,
look at it.
and is that when we're talking about succession and estate planning, and unfortunately, none of us live forever. Ryan, me and you included, buddy. You've thought about this, but oftentimes when we talk about succession, it's that conversation that you just said. Well, how do I cash out? How do I profit from the business that I've grown? How do I get my hands on the most amount of money? And for those people out there, those business owners, that's their goal, great. Then make that your goal. But Joe, what I love about the decisions that you've made is that wasn't your goal, even though people pushed you in that direction. You made a clear decision, and that 200 years has been a defining kind of a statement that all the planning work that Pauly Jail has done has been focused around that 200-year mark. And let's admit it, it cost you some money to get that done, didn't it?
Well, honestly, I'm not going to tell you how much I think I could have gotten for my company.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than I sold it for. But once again, I think I looked at that two ways. Let's say that we hadn't done as good as job as we had done investing the money that I did have. All right. We've taken that money and made it grow so that I looked at it like, okay, well, I didn't need to take all that money. I already have my stuff set. So why don't I do the right thing? Okay, which I don't think many people even know what that is anymore, but why not take care of the people? Because let's remember, would I be in this position? Would you have all, if Jared and Regina hadn't been here to help me? I can tell you point blank, the answer to that would be zero. So how do I look at them in the eye every day when they walk into work and go, hey, thanks for all your hard work. See you later. But a lot of people do it, and which is fine. They can do whatever they want to. I felt confident enough in what we had done, what I knew that my company is going to do, that I'm like, there's going to be enough money. There'll be enough money for everyone.
Joe, over the last couple of years, we've dealt with some interesting challenges. We shut the world down in 2020 because of COVID. We saw interest rates go from basically free money to significantly higher than that in the fastest clip we've ever seen. Both of those two things have caused significant challenges, specifically with contractors and builders in other things. It may not impact the county jail business that much, but if you're building hotels and apartment complexes and other things, it certainly has. How have you as a leader worked your way through some of these times of uncertainty and navigated that successfully?
Well, first part is when you talk about interest rates, the goal there is to not owe any money, so you don't have to pay interest. So once we came out of the dark days, we made that 1,000%. We are not going to be borrowing money from people, right? Now, I'll lend you some money if you'd like to. The rates are a little bit higher than you're normally used to, right? And then like during the COVID thing, all right, so we were pretty fortunate here in Indiana because our governor took a lot more aggressive approach of, hey, it's time to get back to work. So, and I have friends who lived in other states where the governors, clamped them down pretty hard, right? And I think that did affect a lot of businesses. Didn't really affect ours because we came back to work, all right? And my answer was, well, if you didn't feel confident enough to be here with your health and everything, then you could go ahead and work at home. But most people came back in and we just went right back to work, all right? And I think I think we're fortunate here in Indiana that Governor Holcomb actually handled it that way. My wife was from Michigan. Their governor had them clamp down on COVID stuff all the way up until last year. So I'm sure it affected a lot of different companies, probably depending on where you were geographically in the country.
Yeah. One of the things that is unique about your industry is it's that the sales cycle, from considering building a jail to funding the jail to actually doing it, well, it can span 10 years or longer.
Well, yeah. I mean, as an example, the number one project that we have that our whole team is on is the new state prison here in Westville, Indiana. I started working on that project 14 years ago. It took me, and finally, it went through, different governors, went through different fundings. Going to do that, and now most counties don't take that long, but you could look at the city of Indianapolis, Marion County. They were under a federal court order to build a new jail in 1973. We didn't build it until 2020.
So for those business owners and entrepreneurs that are listening in, what advice would you give to them about maintaining your relationships with your clients over an extended period of time? I mean,
there's a great commercial, and it goes back probably to the 1980s. And I don't remember what company it was. It could have been anyway. So there was an older gentleman. He was obviously supposed to be the CEO of the company. All right. And he walked into a conference room and he had all of his sales and all of his national sales guys there. And I think the point was, he was like, hey, we've gotten away from the one-on-one. Today, I think so many people would rather text you or send you an email. And the point of that, he gave everybody a first-class airline ticket. He said, it's time we go back and see our customers face to face. So that's one thing I think a lot of people have lost track of, the communication. We don't take that for granted at all. We are always going to see our clients and customers. We get them together for seminars. We get them together for meetings. We go to their towns. I mean, and I think that's the one thing that we do that at least my competition doesn't do it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of companies today would tell you that we have so many people, they don't have any communication skills anymore.
I would imagine you're probably right. Joe, you've been a great mentor to me over the last 20 or so years, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. But let me ask you, who's been your mentor, and how have they guided you through your journey?
Well, actually, my father was certainly the first mentor I ever had. In fact, when I was in grade school, I can remember boys always would ask their father, the father would say, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they'd say, an astronaut or fireman or policeman. And I always said I wanted to be the world's greatest salesman because I thought my father was the world's greatest salesman, right? And so he said, okay, so if you want to be a world's greatest salesman, you're going to have to learn to read people. Before you even meet them, you got to learn to read them. So on Sunday afternoons, while you were playing baseball or soccer or football, I would go to Lambert International Airport in St. Louis, Missouri, sit down on the bench, watch 1,000 people walk by. And of course, back then it's the 60s, so it wasn't billionaires, it was millionaires. My father was tasked me, all right, Joe, pick the millionaire. And of course, I would pick the guy with the fancy suit and the diamond rings and the gold watches. And my dad would be, no, it was the guy who just walked by in the t-shirt and the blue jeans. He's the millionaire. So that was my first. So eventually I learned to read people up and down. And then when I was right after I got out of college, I met a guy by the name of Johnny Houck. His father owned a company called Tubular Steel. Eventually his father passed on and Johnny took it over. And today he probably owns 25 or 30 businesses, but he always the one thing he taught me, I never forget the way he said it. He's like, you know what? You need to control the business and grow the company. And by that, he meant, you know what? If it looks too good to be true, all that money, it's going to be too good to be true. So don't take it all out and buy a fancy house and big car, because one day it's going to turn and you're going to have kept some of that money. So don't spend it, grow the business. And I still talk to him probably once every 2 or 3 months.
Sounds like he'd be a good guy to introduce me to.
Oh, he's awesome.
um, so here you are. You've had a great career. You've built this company up to where it's at now. As you look forward, what legacy do you really hope to leave behind through your business?
Well, what I'm gonna leave behind, because I think I've trained people here, the leadership, well enough that they're training the up and coming people. We're just going to do things the right way. As an example, of all the people I know that are in business, and I don't care if you're in construction or whatever, manufacturing, whatever, I think we're one of the few companies that actually closes deals still on a handshake. And I know a lot of people don't believe that that's true, but I can tell you that it is true. And if you met my construction management firm buddies, they would tell you. So if I left behind anything, it's just, you know what, give your word, shake the guy's hand, do the job. Because if you're not as good as your word, then your contract doesn't mean anything. And eventually your reputation is not going to mean anything either.
Joe, I can't imagine a better way to conclude this interview than the statement that you just made. I believe that it sums you up in the best words I can think of. And I just want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your friendship and passing along all this wisdom to those people through this platform. Joe, thank you very much.
Well, great. Thanks, you guys. Really enjoyed it. And call me again sometime.
All right. Ryan, take it from here.
Joe, before we sign off, Joe, for anybody out there that would be interested in learning more about the legacy side of things with Pauly Jail, or just how it is that you guys ultimately get granular and work with your clients, what is the best way somebody could look you guys up, find you online, and open up a dialogue?
They could go to my email. It's just joe@paulyjail.com. I'm always open up to meeting people. You can call me on my cell phone, 317-432-3702. Make an appointment to stop by my office. Or if you want to go out and play a round of golf, go have some drinks and dinner. I mean, if I'm in town, I'm pretty available to do pretty much anything.
And I'd say the other thing is that Joe does a fantastic job through his website telling the history and the legacy of his business. And that, of course, is paulyjail.com.
All righty, there you have it, folks. Joe Pohrer from the Pauly Jail Building Company. Really appreciate his time and jumping on board the show here today. But look, folks, before we wrap up today's conversation, Darrick and his team want to share a really unique piece of value with you guys today. They put together a booklet that allows you to discover some of the strategies that the top entrepreneurs are really leveraging to master their finances overall. And it's packed with research and real world statistics, really breaking down how these successful entrepreneurs and business owners are handling their finances, both for their personal and professional lives. So if this is something that interested you, not just this idea of the booklet, but of course, the conversation at large that we have with Joe Pohrer today, make sure you head over to mononwealth.com, go over to contact us, and request your free copy so that you can take control of your financial world. But look, for Darrick and Joe, I'm Ryan. We're going to go ahead and say so long now, but we appreciate you stopping by and being with us on Modern Wealth Management.